Freakonomics is things you always thought you knew but didn't, and things you never thought you wanted to know about but do. Once said, a thing worth having is a thing worth cheating for. Or as Mark Grace of the Chicago Cubs once said, if you ain't cheating, then you ain't trying.
Everybody understands why a kid would want to cheat on the SATs, right? They have huge gains of being able to get into Stanford or Harvard and have a good life as a result of cheating on a test, okay? What's harder to think is, why would a teacher cheat for a kid on a test? And yet when you go to Chicago and you look back a few years ago, we find that lots and lots of teachers were cheating. Well, why were they cheating? Well, because there's tremendous pressure on these teachers to produce high test scores so that their schools wouldn't get into trouble.
Interestingly, if you look at the sales data on real estate agents' own homes, not their clients' homes, but when they sell their own homes, they get more money than if they sold the same home for a client. Now, why would that be? Well, what we find in the data is that agents hold out for a better price and leave their own homes on the market longer, an average of 10 days longer. But when it comes to your house, well, the agent has an incentive to sell right away.
Why? Because of that $10,000 into his or her pocket, only $150.
I only get $150 because if you take that $10,000 extra dollars, it goes to him. 6% goes to commission, but that gets whacked up. Half goes to the buyer's real estate agent, so I've got half of that 6%, but then I have to kick back half of that to my agency. So I only get 1.5%. So really, in order for me to help him get $10,000 extra dollars, I personally only get $150. But I have to work for So here's why you don't want to be a drug dealer. I mean, if you really want to be a drug dealer, go be a drug dealer, but it's not going to work out how you want it to. Think about this. Economists have this thing they call the tournament model, right? And we all know what it's like. We just don't think about professions as tournaments. But like if you're in a sports tournament, you got to keep winning to advance, right? And there are professions that are like that too. Drug dealing turns out to be one of them. So if you can get a hold of the data from, let's say, a big crack selling gang in Chicago, which we did, you find something really interesting. It is like a tournament where a couple guys will advance and get to the top of the pyramid and make a lot of money, and everybody else, all those other guys who think they're going to get to the top and make a lot of money, don't. And it turns out that they end up making about what they'd make at McDonald's, which is to say bad money. And at McDonald's, you don't have people shooting at you. The risk of death if you're selling crack in Chicago is greater than the risk of death than if you're a soldier in the American Army in Iraq or Afghanistan, for instance. So the moral of the story is, if you want to make a lot of money and you're willing to break the law, you probably shouldn't be a drug dealer. It's very risky, and your chance of making a lot of money are still very slim. So white-collar crime is still the way to go.
If you follow the data, there were 5 states that legalized abortion 3 years before Roe versus Wade, and about 15 years later, their crime begins to fall 3 years before the rest of the country. Then, if you look at the states where abortion was not just legal, but easily available to people who wanted to get them, 16, 17 years after Roe versus Wade, you see a 30% difference between the states doing a lot of abortions and the ones who are doing very few. Finally, all of the effect we see in the divergence in crime, all of that is concentrated among people under the age of 25, people young enough to have been exposed to legalized abortion. People older than the age of 25, there's no difference whatsoever between the high abortion states and the low abortion states. And I think in some ways that's the best evidence we have that legalized abortion is responsible for a big chunk of the decline in crime.
Parents look at successful families and successful parents, and they just want to copy them, and so they try to do the things that they think that they did to get their family so smart and good and whatever, which is really just can be a really bad mistake of correlation causality. So like, you're going to take your kid to, you know, every Mommy and Me music class, and you're going to take them to the museum and start looking at all the Greek and Roman sculptures, and you probably already were playing Mozart in the womb and things just to get the brain really stimulated. And it turns out that as best as we can tell from looking at data of actual parents and children along these dimensions, that none of that stuff really matters. It just doesn't make your child better, smarter. It might make you happier, might even make them happier, might also make them miserable. But it turns out that those are not causal elements.
I almost said...
More evidence than ever that the culture we come from influences the names we choose. Just ask the baby naming experts.
More and more today, you see parents choosing a name almost as if they're launching a product, that you're trying to position your child for the best chance of success in a global marketplace.
So in an oversaturated marketplace, which names garner the most attention? Are some names destined for the top shelf while others are headed for the bargain basement? Let's take a look at two different product lines. Turns out there is such a thing as a knockoff name. The top 5 middle-class white girl names from Fryer's study are, in order of popularity, Ashley, Lauren, Jessica, Emily, and Sarah. While the top 5 lower-income white girl names are Brittany, Samantha, Amanda, Jessica, and Ashley. So what's happened to Ashley? She's fast losing her popularity on the middle-class list, but she's #1 among the Walmart crowd. As those wealthier folks see their names popping up everywhere, they quickly discard them in favor of less common merchandise. And just like that, today's high-end Ashley becomes tomorrow's low-rent Trashly.